This is John Costa, the editor of Citizen's Eye. It's just gone 6:30 on the 1st of December, and we're here outside BBC Radio Leicester because there's been a meeting here this evening organised by a group of people. We've had about 20 people turn up, and we've had Moggy here, who's the coordinator for it all. How are you, Moggy? Okay?
All right, Joe. Yeah.
Good call. Now, you've had quite about 20 odd people come down, is that right?
Yeah, about 20 people turned up, yeah.
So what sort of things were you talking about then?
We got interviewed by the BBC and we explained the problem of the cuts would affect output to the radio station. This would also affect people who are housebound and elderly who, to be honest, I don't think they know about it, John, because they're not on Twitter or Facebook, and there hasn't been an awful lot put out about exactly what the cuts are going to be. I think they're going to lose an awful lot of broadcasting hours locally. It's going to go regional, and to be honest, regional's no good for local interest, because things like the snow death that happened at the winter time, and also school closures, people always listen to Radio Leicester. It's a lifeline, and if the hours are cut and it goes regional, we've lost something that is part of our history. The station started in 1967, which a lot of people don't realise. It was the first local radio station.
Because it was the first radio station outside London, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. And, it's worth fighting for. That's why I'm here with a friend of mine, Ruth, or Kizzy on Twitter. And, we actually met through Twitter. So Twitter is a good way of putting things out. But obviously people who aren't on Twitter are missing out on what's happening today. I mean, I think if people had known, we'd have had a lot more than 20.
Yeah, well, I think as Kizzy was saying, it's the start, isn't it? It's making people realise that today is so Save Local Radio Day. It's been on Twitter and, like I said, on websites as well, and there were protests down in London, and also the one here at Leicester got a mention, didn't it? So at least your campaign and your profile raising has worked quite well. I mean, people don't realise it's not necessarily the breakfast show, is it, and the lunchtime show. It's like the mid-morning and the afternoon shows that could possibly be cut or made regionalised and stuff.
And as you can imagine, what's the use of you listening in after 1 o'clock? There's some broadcast that's coming from Derby somewhere. It's going to be no relevance to us at all. We've got to keep it local, because we have local people here, local DJs, one called Ruth Rajani, who's marvellous in the community, and he helps us get things out, which is what local and community is all about.
And the thing is, with things like the winter coming up, like you said, snow and winter delays and road traffic and that, people rely on the BBC Radio Leicester more than probably people realise for getting that kind of information, isn't it?
I think people don't realise until it is deep snow the first thing they say is, let's listen to Radio Leicester Snow Day, and that obviously puts out the thing of schools being shut, and it gets information out. I mean, last year I was getting things like Land Rovers sorted out so people could coordinate and get out there to people that hadn't got milk and bread, simple things, because we're that snowed in. And 4x4s were obviously being utilised to get to them.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much. So maybe we can bring in... Are you happy to have a quick chat?
Yeah,
okay, excellent. Now, you've been joined, haven't you, Moggy, by our local MP, Jonathan Ashworth. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you doing?
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much for coming down and supporting Moggy. He's a great advocate for local radio, and has certainly been for a long time. I mean, from your point of view, do you think, the changing of any kind of broadcasting sort of mid-morning and mid-afternoon will have an impact on local community?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is Radio Leicester was the first local radio station. It's an absolutely fantastic facility, so important to the community, and I've spoken in Parliament on this. I'm opposing these cuts, and I think the BBC have got to think again, because communities in Leicester, and indeed Leicestershire, rely on local radio. They rely on local Radio Leicester, and we've got to fight these cuts, because if they go ahead with the cuts, what they're proposing, it would be an absolute tragedy for local communities here in Leicester.
Do you think the fact that a lot of people who would benefit, say, from Radio Leicester across the city and the county, listening in the afternoon and things like that, for school information, or people that are housebound and that kind of stuff, would find it very difficult without this, because they're invisible almost? They're hard to count on. They're actually hard to get their voices mobilised to say things like this, aren't they? Yeah,
Radio Leicester provides excellent journalism. It provides a brilliant airing of the issues affecting Leicester, but it's an important service to communities. So people get to know about what's going on, particularly when the weather is very cold and the elderly can't get out. They rely on Radio Leicester. But also when we have the disturbances here in Leicester over the summer, people could listen to what was going on, they could find out what was going on from Jonathan Lampen and Radio Leicester. We would lose that if afternoon coverage was merged with Radio Nottingham and Radio Derby. We would lose that local angle and perspective, which is so valuable to many vulnerable people in Leicester. That's why we've got to oppose these cuts, and we've really got to fight them all the way.
And one final thing as well. Local radio stations like BBC Radio Leicester and obviously the independents and the ones on the internet, they're a vital part of keeping people involved in the whole kind of democratic process as well, aren't they? With like the local newspaper, the Leicester Mercury, and sort of community media and social media like Twitter and Facebook that you use yourself. They're all part of the mix, aren't they, for keeping people engaged in it?
Absolutely. I go on Radio Leicester probably once a week to answer questions, both from the public. Moggy has rang me up when I've been on Radio Leicester, but also from the presenters. Tough questions from Moggy. Difficult questions, putting me on the spot, but that's the right thing. You've got to be able to hold your local politicians to account, whether it's me or Peter Salisbury, asking us the tough questions. If the radio stations was merged with Radio Nottingham and Derby, you would lose the ability to put your local politicians, your local decision makers on the spot and scrutinise the decisions that they make. It's tough for us politicians when Moggy's ringing me up on the radio asking me tough questions, but that's important because the British public and the people and the public in Leicester absolutely should have that opportunity to be able to put us politicians on the spot, and Radio Leicester is part of scrutinising the decisions that go on here in the city of Leicester.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for talking to us. Thanks very much, Andy, for talking to us as well. Well done, everybody.